When you hear Garden of Eden, what pops into your head? Maybe a pretty picture of a perfect park. Green grass, tall trees, flowers everywhere, Adam and Eve, naked and happy, walking around with friendly lions and lambs. It's a nice thought. A peaceful, idyllic place. But if you dig into the old stories, the real story from the Bible, you find something much deeper, more complex, more meaningful. The Garden of Eden wasn't just some beautiful spot. It was the start of everything for humanity. It was our first home. It was where God walked among us in a way we can only dream of now. So, what was it really like? Let's try to piece it together. We don't have photos. We don't have maps? Not really. But the book of Genesis gives us clues. It tells us about a place that was both real and incredibly significant, a place that shaped all human history. First off, it was a garden. That might sound obvious, but think about what a garden implies. It wasn't wild, untamed wilderness. It was a cultivated space. The Bible says God himself planted it. This isn't just nature growing on its own. It's a deliberate act of creation. God designed it. He put thought into every tree, every plant. It was a place of order and beauty, but a managed beauty. A place intended for life to thrive. And it wasn't just any garden. It was a garden in Eden. Eden seems to be the larger region, and the garden was a special part of it, specifically in the east of Eden. The Bible tries to tell us where this place was. It names rivers. Genesis chapter 2, verse 10-14 talks about a river that flowed out of Eden to water the garden, and then it divided into 4 main rivers. The Pishon, the Gihon, the Tigris, and the Euphrates. Now, the Tigris and Euphrates, we know those. They still flow through what we call the Middle East today, through modern-day Iraq. But the Pishon and the Gihon, those are a mystery. People have tried for centuries to pinpoint them. Some think they dried up, some think the whole geography changed after a big flood. Others believe these names might be symbolic or refer to ancient rivers whose courses are now lost to us. The point is, the Bible gives us geographical markers. It tries to place Eden in a real-world location. This tells us it wasn't just a fairy tale land. It was meant to be understood as a real, physical place on Earth. It was tangible. You could, theoretically, walk there, before it was lost anyway. But the exact coordinates aren't what's most important. What's important is what it represented. What was its purpose? Why did God create this special garden? The Bible tells us God placed the man, Adam, in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. This is a crucial detail. Adam wasn't put there to lounge around all day. He had a job, meaningful work. This challenges our idea of paradise as a place where you do nothing. In God's original design, work was good. It wasn't a curse. It was a way to participate in creation, to manage and cultivate the beauty around him. Imagine that kind of work. Not sweaty, frustrating labor against thorns and thistles, but joyful, purposeful work in a perfect environment, tending to plants that flourished effortlessly, maintaining beauty that never faded. The garden was a place of incredible abundance. All sorts of trees grew there, pleasing to the eye and good for food. Imagine picking fruit from any tree you wanted, and every fruit was delicious, nourishing, and perfect. No blight, no pests, no bad harvests, pure, unadulterated goodness. It was a place where basic needs were met completely, effortlessly. You wouldn't worry about where your next meal came from. You wouldn't worry about shelter. Everything was provided right there. But it wasn't just about food, it was about beauty. Pleasing to the eye. The aesthetics were perfect. Colors, smells, sounds. Imagine the sounds. The rustle of perfect leaves, the gentle flow of the central river, the calls of animals, all in harmony. No jarring noises, no pollution, just pure, natural beauty, curated by God himself. And speaking of animals, what were they like? The Bible says Adam named all the animals. This implies a close relationship, a mastery over them, but not a cruel one. It suggests a time before fear between humans and animals. No predator-prey dynamics. No animals running in terror from humans. Perhaps they were all herbivores. A world where a lion lay down with a lamb wasn't just a prophetic vision for the future. It might have been the reality in Eden. They were part of creation, and Adam was meant to be their good shepherd, their ruler in a benevolent way. But there were 2 very special trees in the middle of the garden, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. These weren't just decorative. They were central to God's plan and humanity's choice. The tree of life. What did it do? It seems to have been the source of perpetual life. To eat from it meant to live forever, or at least to sustain life indefinitely. It was a gift, freely available, offering immortality. This wasn't something to be earned. It was simply there, part of God's abundant provision. Then there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is often misunderstood. It wasn't an evil tree. The fruit itself wasn't poisonous in a physical sense. What it represented was God's boundary. God told Adam not to eat from it. He said, "You must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat from it, you will certainly die." This tree was a test, a choice. Would humanity trust God? Would they obey their creator? Or would they decide they knew better, that they could define good and evil for themselves? The knowledge wasn't inherently bad, but taking it outside of God's will, seizing it for oneself, was the problem. It was about autonomy, about rejecting dependence on God. And what about the man himself, Adam? He was created in God's image. He was perfect, not just physically, but spiritually and mentally. He had a direct, unhindered relationship with God. Imagine that. No sin, no guilt, no shame. He could talk to God directly. God would walk in the garden in the cool of the day. They had communion, a real personal connection. This wasn't some distant deity. It was a father figure, a guide, a friend, walking and talking with his creation. This is perhaps the most profound aspect of Eden, the closeness to God, the complete absence of anything that would separate them. Then came Eve. God saw that it was not good for Adam to be alone, so he made a helper, a partner, suitable for him. She was taken from Adam's side, showing their deep connection, their unity. They were one flesh, and they were naked, but felt no shame. This is a huge deal. No shame, no self-consciousness, complete openness, vulnerability, and trust between them. And between them and God. There's a picture of perfect relationship, perfect intimacy without any of the complications and brokenness we experience today. So, the Garden of Eden was a place of perfect provision, perfect beauty, perfect purpose, perfect relationships, and perfect communion with God. It was a temple, in a way. The place where God met with his creation. It was the center of the world, a prototype of what God intended for all of creation. Adam's job wasn't just in the garden, but eventually to extend the garden, to cultivate the whole earth, bringing it into that same state of order and beauty under God's loving rule. But we know the story doesn't end there, not for Eden. Something went terribly wrong. The serpent, a creature of craft and deceit, entered the picture. He twisted God's words. He sowed doubt. He promised knowledge and godlike status if they ate from the forbidden tree. And they listened. They chose to disobey. They ate the fruit. The moment they ate, everything changed. Their eyes were opened, not to new physical sights, but to a new terrible awareness. They suddenly knew evil. They understood their nakedness in a new horrifying way. It brought shame. They hid from God. The perfect relationship was broken. The perfect intimacy shattered. When God came walking in the garden, as he always did, Adam and Eve were no longer eager to greet him. They were terrified, they hid, and then came the confrontation, the blame game. Adam blamed Eve, and Eve blamed the serpent. The innocence was gone, and with that, the consequences unfolded. The ground was cursed. Work, once joyful, would now be toilsome, producing thorns and thistles. The childbirth would be painful. Relationships between man and woman would be strained, marked by power struggles, and death entered the world. The kind of death God had warned about, not just physical death, but spiritual death, a separation from God. Because of their sin, Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden. This wasn't just a punishment, though it felt like one. It was also an act of mercy. God didn't want them, now corrupted by sin, to eat from the tree of life. If they had, they would have lived forever in their fallen, sinful state. That would have been a truly terrible fate. So God blocked the way back to the tree of life. He placed cherubim, powerful angelic beings, and a flaming sword to guard the way. Eden became inaccessible to humanity. It became a lost paradise. So, after the fall, what was the Garden of Eden like? It was still there, but it became a reminder of what was lost, a symbol of broken perfection, a place that humanity longed for but could not reach. It went from being a home to being a barrier. A place of perfect communion turned into a place guarded by an uncrossable line. What happened to the physical garden itself? The Bible doesn't say. Some traditions believe it continued to exist, hidden, maybe protected by divine power. Others think it eventually withered or was consumed by natural disasters. Perhaps the Great Flood changed the whole landscape. What we know for sure is that its purpose for humanity changed dramatically. It was no longer our home. But the story of Eden doesn't just end with expulsion and loss. It sets the stage for everything that follows in the Bible. It shows us God's original intention. It tells us what humanity was made for. It gives us a glimpse of perfection. And it reveals the devastating impact of sin. The entire biblical narrative, in a way, is about God working to restore what was lost in Eden. Think about the descriptions of heaven, or the new earth, in the book of Revelation. We read about a river of the water of life, flowing from the throne of God. And on either side of the river, there's the tree of life. Its leaves are for the healing of the nation, and there will be no more curse. This is a deliberate echo of Eden. It shows God's plan to bring humanity back to a garden-like state, a place of perfect communion with Him, where the tree of life is again accessible. So the Garden of Eden was not just a historical place. It was a foundational place. It was a real place that taught us about God's character, His generosity, His order, His desire for relationship. It taught us about humanity's original state, our dignity, our purpose, our capacity for intimate relationship with God. And it taught us about sin, its origins, its devastating consequences, and its separation from God. It was a place of direct divine presence. That's probably the most important thing to grasp about it. God walked there, He spoke there, He was present in a way that Adam and Eve could physically experience. There was no veil, no temple, no priest needed to mediate between God and man. It was direct. That directness, that unmediated access to God is what we lost. And it's what we still long for, whether we realize it or not. The Garden of Eden, then, was really like the first temple, a sacred space created by God where He dwelt with His people. It was a place of worship, even if Adam and Eve didn't use that exact word for their interaction with God. Their work, their obedience, their communion, it was all a form of worship. It was a picture of heaven on earth. When we think about Eden, we should also think about our own inner longings. Why do we love beautiful parks? Why do we seek out nature? Why do we dream of peaceful, abundant places? Part of it, maybe a big part, is an echo of Eden, a memory deep in our bones of what was and what could be again. A longing for that lost perfection, that perfect harmony. We still want to live in a place where work is meaningful, where relationships are pure, where we are fully at peace with our surroundings, and most importantly, with our Creator. It wasn't a static place either. Adam and Eve were given a commission to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. The garden was the starting point, the headquarters, so to speak, for expanding God's good order across the globe. It was the blueprint for what the whole earth was meant to become. Humanity's mission was to take the principles and perfection of Eden and spread them outwards, making the entire world a garden temple for God. This means Adam wasn't just tending to a small patch of land. He was given a grand vision, a cosmic responsibility. He was God's vice-regent, meant to rule creation on God's behalf, and Eve was his essential partner in this grand endeavor. Imagine the potential. Imagine humanity in its original, unfallen state, guided by God, expanding that perfection, the whole earth blooming. But that potential was cut short. The Garden of Eden stands as a testament to that lost potential. It shows us the stark contrast between God's perfect design and humanity's fallen reality. It's a reminder of how much we gave up for a fleeting taste of forbidden knowledge, a deceptive promise of autonomy. So, when you picture the Garden of Eden, don't just see a pretty landscape. See a place bursting with life, with purpose, with perfect relationships. See the direct loving presence of God, personal dignity and responsibility, and then see the tragic choice that broke it all. But don't let the sadness be the final word. Remember that Eden also holds the promise of a future where God will once again dwell with us, and the tree of life will be for the healing of all. The Garden of Eden was a beginning, and it points to an end where paradise is restored, not just as a memory, but as a new reality.